Hold up real quick. What do you guys think of my outfit? Do you guys like the shirt? Peep the fit, guys. I bought this shirt at Walmart for $10, baby. I love the shirt. I love it. I love it. I love it. I just wanted to show you guys because it's kind of cropped in the video, so I didn't get to show you guys. So I wanted to stand back and kind of show you the fit. And I also realized that in the last video I did, I was also wearing a Halloween Michael Myers shirt. So do I have an obsession with Michael Myers? Yes, I do. Poppy Myers, as some would say. I certainly call him Poppy Myers. Yeah, he can come by my house on Halloween anytime. But anyway, God, I need a haircut as well. Oh, Jesus. Anyway, welcome back to my channel where I talk about everything and anything, well, horror. Today, I will be talking about The Strangers Chapter 1. This film is directed by Renny Harlin, which shocks the hell out of me because Renny Harlin is no stranger to the horror genre, nor is he a stranger to the film industry as a whole. Like, he's been doing films since, I think, the late 90s, maybe even early 90s, late 80s. He did Nightmare on Elm Street 4, he did Deep Blue Sea, he did Die Hard 2. So all of these like amazing films he's done, and then he goes on to direct The Strangers Chapter 1. And we will get into that in a minute. It also stars Madeline Pesh and Froy Gutierrez. The film follows a couple, Ryan and Maya, who are traveling cross country, and they end up getting stranded in a small town in Oregon, and they have to stay overnight. And throughout the night, they begin to get terrorized by 3 masked assailants. So before we get into like the actual review, I do kind of want to talk about my relationship with the Strangers franchise, as we can call it now, as a whole. So I've never been a huge fan of the original Strangers. I know that's probably going to get me in trouble with some people. I'm sure there's some people that are probably already signing off of this video right now just by hearing that. But there are so many things that frustrate me about that original film, especially within the back half of the film. Some of the character decisions that are made in that back half of that film are just so frustrating to me. Like, some of the decisions and just the characters as a whole. Like, I love Liv Tyler as an actress, but there are some of her acting choices in this film that just really bother me. The horror hippie, her review of The Strangers, I don't know if she'll ever watch this video, but she is one of my favorite people on YouTube. She did a review of this film, and she talks about Liv Tyler's acting in her review, and it's so spot on. Like, she just talks like so weird and like so soft. She's so soft-spoken, and it's kind of weird. It's a very interesting choice. And then you get to the character of James, and I just cannot fucking stand him. He is literally the most annoying character in the movie. Like, I was wanting him to die from like the first probably 15 minutes of the film, and that's not an exaggeration. Like, I wanted this fucker to die. So when his death finally comes, I cannot say I was too sad about it. But yeah, the original Strangers has never been my favorite. And then The Strangers Prey at Night came out in 2018, exactly 10 years after the original Strangers. And I actually really, really enjoy that film. I didn't know how I felt about it the first time I watched it, but now that I've watched it more and more, I've truly come to appreciate it and all of like the fun 80s campiness that it brings. I also love the characters in Prey at Night a lot more than I do the original one. So that being said, like, my relationship with the Strangers franchise as a whole is a little bit shaky. So when the trailer for this film came out, or I guess even before the trailer for this movie came out, when all the talk about the new Strangers film coming out, I was really actually kind of excited because I was like, oh, there's so much that they can do to improve upon the original. Or, you know, if this is going to be a prequel, if this is going to be a sequel, you know, there's so much material, there's so much stuff that they can do. So I was excited. I was looking forward to it, to be honest with you. And then when the trailer came out, I watched it, and I have to say I was really, really underwhelmed. I was thinking like, this is it. Like, this literally looks just like a glossier, more high budget version of the original film. And so I did say in my previous video that maybe they did that on purpose to kind of like throw us off. I'm excited to see if they do anything different, because maybe
Because there was a random thought that popped into my head when I was watching the trailer the first time. I was like, are they trying to make it look like a higher, glossier version of the original Strangers movie to kind of throw us off so that we kind of go into it thinking that it's going to be your typical, Strangers film? I had that thought, but maybe I'm giving them too much credit, so maybe I don't want to hop into that thought too fast.
Boy, was I wrong. Yeah, they certainly weren't trying to throw us off. They definitely ripped off the original film. I mean, they did a few different things here and there, but it is literally just a higher budget, glossier film, like glossier version of the original, and not in a great way. Like, they don't do a whole lot different with this film. Not enough to warrant chapter 2 and chapter 3. Which that's a whole other thing. Like, that just bugs me to no end, the whole chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 thing. It just feels like they're kind of trying to piggyback off the success of the Fear Street trilogy, and then X, Pearl, and Maxine that have been coming out the last 2 years. It just feels to me like they're really trying to like cash in on this phenomenon that's been going on with horror movies lately, and it feels lazy to me. Because I mean, I feel like I'm not opposed to doing like a part 1, part 2, part 3, but like the way that the Fear Street trilogy did it, the way that Ty West did it when he announced X, Pearl, and Maxine, like, it was so subtle. With the Fear Street trilogy, they did something different with each one that we got. It didn't feel like it was the same thing. So that being said, it does feel like they're trying to cash in on the success of films that have been doing this, part 1, part 2, part 3 thing. And so that kind of, I don't know, it just rubs me the wrong way, especially since the first one was so, how do I say it? Sloppily done, like very lazy. And I hate to say the word lazy because there are quite a few positives that I want to get in with this film before I get into the negatives, because I don't want to completely tear this film apart. I've seen a lot of people just completely rip this film to shreds, and I don't necessarily. I mean, I can understand their, issues with the film, but I can't fully understand why people hate it as much as they do. The feeling that I felt most of all is disappointment. Honestly, like, I felt disappointed. I felt let down because I really felt like they could have done so much more. I'm going on another tangent, so I will just get into the positives that I have for this film. So the first positive I kind of wanted to talk about is I did kind of enjoy the opening scene a little bit. I thought it was vastly different from any other Strangers movie we'd seen. Like, I loved the setting in the woods, the way it was shot, like the man running through the woods with like the fog. And it was really interesting to actually see the strangers kill someone in the daylight, because we've never seen them kill during the day. We've only ever seen them do it under the cover of darkness. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought that was like a really like interesting opening scene to kind of start us off. The only thing I wish, and this is like kind of an issue that I have with the whole movie as a whole, like, it's rated R, but it's really only rated R because of, they say the F word maybe 1 or 2 extra times than they're supposed to.
I actually do cuss a little.
Do you?
Also, yeah.
What's your favorite curse word?
Probably fuck.
But there's like barely any blood. There's barely any violence in this film. Even with the opening scene, I was very underwhelmed with the amount of violence. Like, I was kind of hoping that they would kind of up the ante as far as like violence goes, because even with the first one, it's not incredibly violent, but there's just something about the way they choose to shoot the violence in the first film that makes it feel visceral. This, not so much. It didn't feel visceral to me at all. It just kind of felt like it almost kind of felt like they might as well have just cut away from the kills because we didn't really see anything anyway. But that being said, like, I did kind of enjoy the opening scene. I also enjoy the setting of this film. Like, I really love where they filmed this. The woods, this Airbnb, it's beautiful. Like, I would love to stay here, and I don't even like the woods. Like, the woods scare the shit out of me. But I would probably stay at this Airbnb. Like, it was nice. Like, it was a decent place. I liked the small town setting. I liked the way, like, at night, the way the fog rolled in through the trees and all that. And that's another thing I really loved. I loved the lighting and the cinematography in this film. You get like a lot of blues, you get a lot of really pretty like nighttime kind of colors, and I really liked that. It was very visually appealing for sure. Like this film was definitely A plus in the visuals department, because it was a very nice looking film. So I enjoyed that a lot. I also enjoy the characters in this one a lot more than I do in the first one. Yeah, they still make stupid decisions, a lot of stupid decisions. And I've heard a lot of people gripe about the decisions that are made in this film. And yes, I do agree. But for some reason, like, I was rooting for these characters to survive a lot more than I was for the characters in the first film. Just because the way that they kind of treat each other. They treat each other a lot better than they do in the first film. And so that I appreciated a lot. Madeline Pesh also killed it in this movie. I mean, she has a couple of questionable moments that I will talk about. But for the most part, she kind of carried this film, if I'm being honest. Froy Gutierrez, I've seen Froy in a couple of other things. He was in a TV show called Cruel Summer that came out a few years ago. It was kind of a big deal. A lot of people were talking about it. I personally really enjoyed it. And he's in the first season of that show. And there was always something about his acting in that show that I was just like, there's just something not right. Like, it almost kind of reminded me of the way Harry Styles acts in Don't Worry Darling. Like, it was just very like he went to the school of, let's, you know, get really angry because that's an emotion, or let's get really sad because that's an emotion, but never fully go there. It just feels like his acting is a little bit restrained in everything that I've seen him in, and this film is no exception. I think he did pretty decent for the most part in some parts, but there's some acting that I will get into in a minute when I get into my negatives that I would like to talk about. Another thing that I really liked is, and I heard a lot of people kind of complain about this, but I kind of wanted to bring like a different perspective on it, because as someone who has gotten high before quite a few times and has gotten extremely paranoid because of it, I have seen and heard things. Like, I have hallucinated things, and I know that's crazy to say because it's just on weed, but like, I have seen things and I have heard things. And so to me, it didn't feel too far-fetched to believe that like she could have imagined maybe seeing somebody, and maybe not even that. Like, I kind of appreciated the way that Ryan went about kind of comforting Maya and kind of talking her down after he finds her in the house. Because in the first movie, James is just an insufferable prick. Excuse my language, he's a prick. He sits there and treats Liv Tyler like she's stupid the entire movie. He sits there and gaslights her. He's like, oh, there was nobody in the house. Nobody could have come in here. Blah, blah, blah. We searched the whole house. Well, dumbass, maybe they left before you got back. And maybe, since she doesn't have a phone, how do you explain that? How do you explain where her phone went? She just lost it? Okay, cool. Just, the way that he treats her in the first movie, I can't stand it. So when I watched this movie, I found it a lot more endearing and more refreshing to see that he doesn't just treat her like she's stupid. Like, he kind of jokes about it. He's more like calm and laid back, as opposed to James, who's just a dick. So I know a lot of people have a lot of issues with that scene and the way that it played out, but I didn't have as big of an issue with it as other people did. And for my final positive, I did kind of want to discuss a scene with, I will be getting into spoilers with this review. I probably should have prefaced that at the start of this video. There will be spoilers. So I will not spoil it right now, but when I get into my negatives, I am going to be spoiling it, because I just feel like there isn't any way you can spoil this movie. And to be honest, like, there's not a whole lot different with this movie than there is with the original. So I really don't feel like I'd be spoiling much anyway. But I just want to throw that out there in case there are people that haven't seen it that still want to watch it. But there was one particular scene that I did like in this film. There was a scene with a nail. And if you've watched it, if you know, you know. I really liked how the suspense played out in that scene. I just really liked that scene. It was kind of surprising to me. I kind of went into this movie not really wanting to be spoiled. I mean, I knew that most of it was probably just going to be a carbon copy of the original anyway, but I still kind of wanted to go into it blind just to see if there's anything new that I would, you know, enjoy. And that one's particular scene, I did really enjoy it. So those are my positives. Now, getting into my negatives. And the first negative, the most blaring negative that I think most people have with this film is the marketing of this film. They talked so much about how this was a prequel and this wasn't a remake and that this was an entirely new story. I even think it says in the trailer, like, find out how the strangers became the strangers, which is stupid to me anyway. I don't want to know how the strangers became the strangers. It's kind of how, like, the allure of Michael Myers, and that's the issue that I have with the Rob Zombie films, is we don't need an entire backstory to explain where these characters came from. They're evil because they're evil, and let's just leave it at that. I just feel like it's so much scarier when the villains in horror films don't always have a backstory. I mean, sometimes I feel like it's necessary to, you know, feed antagonists a backstory. You know, we can kind of get to know them a little bit. But in this case with the strangers, the whole reason why the first film worked in the first place is because we didn't know anything about these strangers. We didn't even see their faces at the end. You know, Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman see their faces when they reveal themselves, but we don't, as an audience, we don't know who these people are. They just decided to pick a random house one night and attack this couple, and then they went on their merry way to do it again. So that is terrifying to me. That aspect is terrifying. What I don't like is the fact that we're now more than likely going to get a backstory on these strangers and where they come from. And, you know, I don't want to entirely say that I don't like the idea of it, because I will try to keep an open mind to see what they do in the other two films. But as of right now, I'm not particularly stoked about the fact that we're going to be getting, you know, a quote-unquote backstory. And so, with that being said, I think that is the issue that a lot of people have with this film. I think maybe, and this is just me spitballing here, I don't know if people are going to necessarily agree with me, and that's fine, but I think people would have been a lot more forgiving of this film had they not tried so hard to convince everyone that this wasn't a remake. You know, they sat there and said, no, it's not a remake, it's not a remake, it's a prequel, it's a whatever, and that's not what it is. It's clearly a remake. You know, so it's poor marketing, and I think that's what has a lot of people annoyed or angry or disappointed, is the fact that, you know, and I even, like I said, I even, you know, chalked it up to, ooh, maybe they're, you know, trying to pull the wool over our eyes, and they're trying to convince us that this is a different kind of film with the trailer that they gave us, which was, you know, like I said, very generic, very paint by numbers. We've seen it already 1,000 times before. So I was not impressed with the trailer, and unfortunately they did just that. Basically everything you see in the trailer are the, you know, most insane parts of the film, basically. I also want to talk about a lot of the dumb decisions that the characters make in this film, because this film is not short of dumb decisions. Trust me. The original frustrates me. This film certainly frustrated me in the same ways that the original did. The fact that, and I will be getting into spoilers now, so if you want to stop the video, go watch The Strangers Chapter 1 and then come back and finish the video. Fair warning. 3, 2, 1. Okay, spoilers, guys. So, just some of the dumb decisions that the characters make. Like, for example, there is a scene where Ryan has one of the strangers at gunpoint, does not fucking pull the trigger, for one, doesn't even have the gun loaded or cocked or whatever before he even goes to shoot the stranger, and he just stands there and allows Sackhead to basically knock him out and disable him from using the gun. That is one of the many dumb decisions that they make. There is another scene where Maya is hiding in a closet after she has been attacked or stalked by the strangers, and she literally has a phone in her hand. And what do you think she does? Well, she certainly doesn't call 911, that's for sure. She literally holds the phone with the flashlight, and whoever's in the house can clearly see that there's a flashlight shining from underneath the door. That scene drove me crazy. At least in the original film, the reason why Liv Tyler couldn't call is because they took her phone and they cut the phone line to the house. So there was no way that she could contact anybody. There is literally a scene right before she hides in the closet where her phone is misplaced, and instead of taking it, they just move it somewhere else, giving her an opportunity to call the police. So the strangers are kind of dumb in this film as well. So it's not just Maya and Ryan. The strangers are also fucking equally as dumb in certain aspects. And like just some of the character decisions were just so stupid. Like there's times when they're out, you know, trying to be quiet and they're talking as if, you know, they're outside where no one can hear them. And it's just so frustrating. Another negative I have is some of just like the choices with acting. Like I said before, Madeline Pesh did a very serviceable job in this film. She basically carries this entire film. But even with Madeline Pesh, there are some scenes that I was just kind of like, ooh, that was a choice. Like there's this face that she makes. Like there's a face that she made even in the trailer. It's the scene where she asks like, why are you doing this to us?
Why are you doing this to us? Because you're here.
She like makes this face where it looks like she's like trying to force out a tear, like
Ha! Ha! I'm acting.
Like she just makes this face like at certain points in the movie, and it's just really like, it just looks like she's trying to like get a constipated tear out of her tear duct. It's just really like cringy to me. And then there were a few scenes like this where she hears a noise or she like senses something and she kind of just goes, like shrugs it off and like shakes her head, and it's just like, I just feel like that's like 101 like acting. Like I just felt like it's just really cringy. Like nobody does that. Like nobody goes, oh. Yeah, I don't know. It was just really weird. And then we're gonna get into Froy Gutierrez's acting. I will say, let's start off on a positive note with this part, because I will say there was one scene where I was like, okay, Froy, like, work. Okay, like the acting is actually, you're actually acting. And it was the scene, the very final scene of them where they're tied to the chairs and the strangers are getting ready to kill them. And it's a kind of an emotional scene. And he asks Maya to marry him. And his acting in that scene was pretty decent, actually. I will say his acting was pretty decent. Like, his emotions, I felt his emotion. I felt like it was real. I was with the character in that scene. Other than that, like, his acting is mediocre at best. Like, there's one scene in particular where they accidentally shoot the landlord of the house, the one who's renting out the Airbnb. And he goes from, like, the realization of killing somebody and kind of almost freaking out to all of a sudden sitting down in an instant, and he's all of a sudden calm again, as if nothing happened. And then he's like, my inhaler, ugh. It was just so, it was so cringy. Like, I was just sitting there like, what is going on? Like, how, and I don't want to completely harp on the actors' performances, because the writing also has a lot to do with it. The film is not very well written, and I was not impressed with the writing of this film. Like, there's so many scenes where they have to over-explain things, like, oh, we're driving in a car. I'm so sick of driving. We've been driving for 5 hours. You know why? Because it's our 5-year anniversary and I have a job interview. And it's like, it's just like, speaking of the job interview thing, there's like also kind of like this like kind of throwaway backstory with Maya where she's an architect and she's applying for a job, and that's why they're traveling cross country. And it kind of feeds into this later scene where she realizes that there is like a crawl space underneath the house, and she knows that because she's an architect. And So it's just like that just felt really just thrown in there for the sake of like that scene for plot convenience. And that's like another thing, like I like characters that are well written and well fleshed out. And granted, as I said before, these characters were a lot more likable in this film than they are in the original. So I did find myself rooting for them in certain aspects. Maybe also because I'm kind of biased because I really like Madeline Pesh as an actress. I think she's gorgeous, and she's a pretty good actress. I will say that. So I was rooting for her to survive. But also, like, the strangers aren't immune to this either. I'm going to get into that as well. There are some very interesting choices, and I don't know if this was a director's decision or like the actor's input or what, but there are a couple of scenes that I just like almost burst out laughing in the theater, and I was surprised that not a lot of other people laughed. And I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this scene either, but there is one particular scene where Ryan confronts one of the strangers. I believe it's Pinup Girl, and she's standing out there like all menacingly, and he's like, "Oh, you better get out of here before I call the cops." And she literally just runs off, and the way she runs is so fucking comical. I almost burst out laughing. Like, there was nothing scary about that scene, and it almost the first thing that popped to my head is the scene in Scary Movie.
I'm sorry if my complicated life is an inconvenience to your perfect existence.
Cindy.
Like, it was so cringy. And the other scene where he has her at gunpoint and she like starts screaming and throwing like a temper tantrum. It was just it was cringy. It was really fucking cringy. But moving on from the actors' performances, I also wanted to talk about the thing I was missing most of all in this film, and that is like the lack of tension or atmosphere. Like, I harp a lot about the first film, but that film, the first like 30 minutes of that film, and even moments towards the back half, I know I talk a lot of mad shit about the back half of the movie, but there are still even moments in the back half of the first Strangers film that are just so high tension and so like suspenseful, and you're on the edge of your seat. Like, there's that iconic shot. It's in the poster of the film. We all know it. If you know, you know. I mean, we all know it at this point. There's that shot of Liv Tyler standing in the kitchen, and you just see in the background the man in the mask come, and he's watching her from the shadows, and there's no music, there's no jump scare, there's just the sounds of the woods and like the slight crackling of the fire and the creaking of the house as he's standing there watching her, and it's just one continuous long shot. And there were so many scenes in this new film, in The Strangers Chapter 1, that just felt so derivative of that, but it lacked any tension or any suspense that the first film did so well at doing. I felt no suspense whatsoever. I felt no terror. I felt no dread at all during this film. And it was really disappointing. It was a really huge letdown for me, because the first time I watched The Strangers, that movie scared the shit out of me. Like, I was home alone. I kind of lived out in the middle of nowhere at that point in time in my life when I watched the film for the first time. And it really scared the shit out of me. Like, it genuinely freaked me out. So I did enjoy it the first time I watched it, and then, as I watched it through the years, more and more problems with it arose. But the first Strangers is so masterful at like nailing that suspense and that dread and that terror, that this new film did none of that. And I was so disappointed. Like I said, the only scene that I felt minor suspense in was the scene where they're crawling underneath the house and Maya gets a nail slammed through her hand and she has to stay quiet, and the pinup girl is standing right above them. That scene was pretty suspenseful for the most part, but I just felt so much disappointment with the lack of suspense. And I think that has to do a lot with the fact that it just felt so derivative of the original film that I knew what was coming. Like, I knew all the stuff that was coming. Like, there's the shower scene where she's showering. He's literally standing like a foot away from her. And instead of it being quiet like the original film, we have to put jump scare music in. And it's just so, like, there's just so many stupid jump scares in this film. Like, I can't even begin to count them. With this film, it just felt so tired and so derivative of things we've seen a million times before. And I was just so, like, bummed out by the end of this film. Like, I was just like, really, guys? Like, this is what you gave us? Honestly, like, and like I said, I don't want to completely be negative about this film because there are some good qualities to it. But it's just, at this point, guys, like, come on, Hollywood. Like, let's do something new. Please. Can we please do a Strangers movie that isn't a fucking shot-for-shot remake of the original? Please. Can we do that? That's all we're asking for. Please. So I'm really hoping with the Strangers Chapter 2 and 3 that we get something different, because there's just so much of the same shit. Recycled and recycled and recycled, and I'm tired of seeing it. I'm pretty sure we're all tired of seeing it at this point. So, and it's just, you know, ridiculous. Oh, and one other negative that I have, Richard Brake is in this movie for some weird reason. Like, he doesn't have a single line of dialogue. Like, I get it if they're setting him up to be in the next 2 films, like, great, cool. But he could have at least had, like, 1 or 2 lines of dialogue. Like, you're telling me he didn't have a single interaction with these 2 characters? Like, these 2 main characters at all? He had no interaction with them? Okay. Like, it just felt weird that he was in the movie. Like, when I watched the trailer, I was like, is that Richard Brake? Like, I was like, that is so weird. And it's, like, so they're underutilizing him as an actor. Like, I would love, and I would hope that they would put him in the other 2 films and that we get to see him, you know, put his talents to good use, because honestly, if Richard Brake was in this movie, he would probably have been the standout of this film, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I mean, I really can't think of any other negatives or positives with this film. I don't even know if I would recommend it to anybody. Maybe, like, I would say this film was definitely catered to, like, teeny boppers, people of a younger generation, or I guess of a newer generation that can appreciate the, you know, new version of the 2008 original. You know, I'm sure maybe some people enjoy this film. I was surprised when I went to the theater and watched it with, like, a crowd of people, that there were, like, audible gasps of, like, oh my gosh, like, still going on in theater. And I was just kind of, like, rolling my eyes, because I was like, I know what's going to happen. Like, so there are definitely people that, you know, are more nuanced and maybe, you know, new to horror that haven't seen the original Strangers or Pray at Night that will enjoy this movie. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. If you enjoyed this movie, that's awesome. I'm happy for you. I really am. But to, you know, people that have been around in the horror genre for a very, very long time, most of us are going to be disappointed with this film. And that's sad to say, because this film had a lot of potential when it was first announced. Like I said, I was super excited for it. And it feels like a letdown. Like, it really does. It feels like such a letdown. But that being said, guys, those are my thoughts for The Strangers Chapter 1. If you liked this video, please like, subscribe, comment down below. Let me know what you thought about The Strangers Chapter 1. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.